Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to a new series of videos where we will implement a chat application. Now, chat applications or chat modules that can be a part of bigger applications are very useful. Every social media, I'm sure you know it, has a chat function. Probably your bank and your insurance company also has a chat function where you can talk to either a physical customer service representative or some kind of AI chatbot. And in this series of videos, I'm not exactly sure how long it's going to be. We will develop a chat application on its own. However, the purpose of these videos is to teach you one of the ways you can implement this so that later on, when you have to implement it in a bigger application, you also can do it and you know how it works, because this is in the end of the day the most important, right? So it's not about you memorizing exactly how we will implement it now. It's about you learning the concepts. And now for the concepts. So we'll be using something called WebSockets. And WebSockets, in short, is something that allows near real-time communication of the client and the server. However, before we get into what WebSockets is, let's take a short look at an application that I already have here finished that we'll implement in the next two videos. So here we have three instances of the same application open. This is to simulate a case where three different users would connect to the application because they wanted to talk to each other. So here what they would do is they would insert three different names. The first one connects, the second one connects, and then the third one also connects. And here you can see that when the third one has connected and the second one connected, on the previous ones, there were notifications displayed that somebody has connected to a chat application, so that you know perhaps with whom you can now talk with. Okay, so let's perhaps start in this chat window, and you can see the applications also responds differently depending on how big the window is. So this is also so that you can use it on a mobile phone. And here, let's perhaps here, go in here, let's type a message. Let's type hi. And here you can see that when we send the message, it has immediately appeared also in this window and in this window down here with saying that it's been sent by a user 2. So let's currently respond with user 1, for example, right? So we can respond with user 1, and you can also see that now a different color, so each user has a different color of messages assigned. We can also see that the message that we have sent here also appeared here and also appeared here. We can also go in here, we can say dummy message, we can press enter, and now you can see that the messages also appeared in the other two windows, and we can see send something else or something else, and you can see that every message that we sent with user 3 has a certain color. Every message that we sent with user 2 also has a certain color. Let's say test. So this has green, right? This has purple, this has blue. And this is what we will implement in the next few videos. Now that I have already mentioned that this application is built using WebSockets. And now, what are WebSockets? So before I explain to you what a WebSocket is, I would like to start with basically explaining to you how a basic HTTP request looks like. So I don't know if you know or not, if you go to a website, you always make either an HTTP or HTTPS request. Yeah, essentially, you send a request to a server saying that you want to get some kind of response from it, or expecting some kind of response. More often than not, you get an HTML document back, right? So if you go to, let's say, www.google.com, you get the Google homepage back as an HTML document. And this is exactly a response. This is the response from the Google server, right? So once again, we, most likely from the browser, send a request to a server, then the connection is established, the server answers, we get an answer, and the connection is closed. Right? Nothing else happens after that. We have our HTML file, perhaps with some JavaScript that makes another request, but every particular request looks like this. But what if the server wanted to send a message to us? right? What are our options? Well, let's think about an example that we are a client and we come to a restaurant. We are very hungry, so we order some food and we sit down and we wait for the food. After some time, we get impatient and we ask the staff, hey, is our food ready? And the staff answers us, no, it's not. So we wait some more, we ask again after we waited some more, is our food ready? They once again answer us, no, it's not. And then we wait some more and we ask again, is our food ready? And then finally they answer, yes, it's ready. We eat and we go out of the restaurant. So here in this example, the client, was the client. So we who were hungry and wanted to eat something were the application. So we're us when we visit a website. We sent requests to a server, which was represented by the restaurant staff in this case, right? So by the waitress or by the waiter. So here, what happened basically is what we would call polling, right? So we were frequently pinging the server or sending requests to the server, asking about the status of something. And if something appeared, we get it, right? So we get the positive response, otherwise we get some kind of negative response. And this is what we would call the polling. And this works, however, you have to constantly ping the server and you have to exchange many requests and many of them will be failed. Now, is there a way to solve this? There is a way to solve this. It's called long polling. Basically, what long polling is if we went back to the restaurant example, is if we came into the restaurant, ordered food and so on, and then we said to the staff, hey, is our food ready now? If not, then answer us when it will be ready. And then we sit and wait and don't do anything else. And then eventually, after perhaps a long time, the request comes back, right? And this is exactly us sending a request to the server, and then the server keeps the request open without an answer, keeps the connection open, and then only answers when the server is ready. This has a downside, a practical downside. It costs a lot of resources on the backend, so on the server, to keep the connection open. And this is just not worth it, even though it seems straightforward. And this is where WebSockets come in. WebSockets allow us to have this two-way communication. So server can now send messages to the client application without having to receive a request from the client first. And this is, I think, now currently why you see why it's a good idea and a good fit to implement a chat application, a very simple chat application with it, because we can just send this information from one of these instances of an application to the server, and then the server remembers or is connected constantly with other instances of the same application and can send the message that we have sent to the server to other instances of the application. And this is exactly what's happening here. If I go here into window number 1 and I type something and I submit it, it gets sent to our server, and then the server sends it to the other two instances of the application. And this is what we will try to implement in this small little series of videos. I'm not exactly sure how long it will take it. Perhaps the development itself will be around 2 episodes. But in the end of the day, we will see. With this lengthy introduction, let's get to coding. So what you will need is you'll need NodeJs installed. I'll be using Visual Studio Code as my code editor, but you can use whatever you want. And that's basically it. Then we'll only use some npm packages, but we'll all install it during the video. Okay, so let's jump to the code editor. So I'm here in Visual Studio Code. I have an empty folder. So let's start our terminal. Let's say npm init-y so that we accept the default settings. And now we have the package.json file generated. Okay, so after that, let's create a client.html file. You can also call this index.html, doesn't really matter. And here I will use the extension that I have. I will say HTML5 just to generate some basic HTML meta tags and some basic tags like head and body and the HTML tag. Here I'll change the title of our document and we'll start with the HTML of our application. So let's put everything inside a main tag. A main tag is just basically a div tag that just gives you a little bit more context, right? So this will hold the main part of our application. So in our case, it will actually hold probably everything. In the end of the day, the HTML will be pretty simple. Okay, so let's create some kind of title, right? Chat app. Let's maybe here have a uppercase. So then what we needed is we needed a few containers. So we need probably some kind of an outer container. Let's give it a class of an outer container to hold everything together. And then we need a few boxes, right? So we need a box for the messages. So let's give here this a class of box and perhaps box outer messages. So here is our box for the messages, and then perhaps we also need some kind of box for the usernames, right? So let's create here a div with box outer usernames. And for now, that's it. So this is sort of our basic setup. Now we have the very basics of our HTML file. So what we need to do is now we need to create a way of serving this file. So we need to create a very simple web server. So if you don't know how to do it, I would refer you to my series of the to-do application. There I start a little bit more from scratch. Now we'll go pretty quick over this. So let's just say npm I for install express. And let's create here a server.js file. And in the server.js file, we'll write something very simple. So this will be just a way for us to serve the HTML file. We could also just open it, but then we would be very likely encountering the cross-origin errors that we will avoid if we just use a very simple web server. You can use the HTTP web server package, or you can just use Express as I do. So here you just require Express, and then we will create an application by calling the Express function. And then we will also use path for the public files. So here we'll say app.use express.static, and then the static files will be in a folder that we have to create, which will be called public. And in the public folder, we'll have our client file, so our client.html file, and we will also have our JavaScript and our CSS. So here we just say path.join, and we extract the directory name that we are currently in, and then we say public, with a P at the beginning, and then we say that's it. Okay, and now what we have to do is we need to do app.get, and what we want to get here is we want to create a get endpoint that will take a request response, and that will just do send us a file. And here once again, let's use the path.join between the directory name and then the public folder, and then our file is called client.html. Okay, that's it. And then let's maybe define a port. So either we define something with an environment variable, app port, or we use port 3000, and then just say app.listen on a port. So it's either something we defined with an environment variable, for now we will not do that, or it's 3000. And then once this is done, we'll just say console.log, application is started and listening on port. And now let's use the string interpolation here. Let's say $, and then parentheses, and here the port. Okay, let's try to run our port. Let's use nodemon so that it refreshes automatically. Server.js. And I'll now open our browser. We should see the client.html file. Okay, so here it is. I can hit refresh. You can see it working. That's perfect. So now, we for now have developed everything we need for the Express server. So the server, the only thing it will do, it will save our HTML file, serve our HTML file, and then it will serve our styles, so our CSS and our JavaScript file. So now this is all that we will do in the server.js file. What we can move on now is we can create here a new file. Let's call it app.js. And here we'll create the backend for our server. So what we want to use is we want to use a package called WS. So we say WebSocket, and then we require a package called VS. And this package called VS we have to install. So let's say npm iws, not VS, WS. It will install in a second, but we can continue. So what we can start with is we can use the WebSocket package, and we can use a server class from the WebSocket package. So we say WebSocket server equals to a new WebSocket dot server, and here the only thing that is required is for us to specify a port. Let's say that it is 7000. And we have our WebSocket server. However, currently it's not doing very much. So let's make it do something. So we say WebSocket server, so WSS on connection. And now here we'll specify a callback that takes a WebSocket. So basically the connected instance of a WebSocket. So now what we can do here is, let's for example say that when we receive a message, so here, and here use the WS on, and here's like an event event listener in JavaScript. We say message. This is our event, and now for the callback. So here, what we'll receive is like a raw message. So this will be a message that will be a string. So message string, and then what we can do, for example, here is we can say const message. We'll parse this message string, and then we'll just display this message that we have just received. For now, that should be plenty. So basically what we did, we have created a new WebSocket server, and then we have added some functionality to it. So basically it will listen on connection for connections, and then when it receives a message, it will basically print this message to a console. So for now, something very simple. We could easily do that with our standard REST interface, REST API, right? So you could also easily print requests to our console here. So now what we need to do is we need to move to our public folder. We need to create here the script.js file, and we need to create our script here. In the script.js file, what we'll do is we'll also use a WebSocket class. However, this will be a different WebSocket class than the one we used in the backend. So the one we used in our Node.js server. Here, what we will say is, let's first say const ws equals await connect to WebSocket. And now we need to implement this function. So this will be an asynchronous function. Connect to WebSocket. That will not currently take any parameters. But what it will do is it will say that const ws, once again, here this ws is defined in the global namespace, here it's defined only in the function. So this is why we also can do it. It will not throw an error. So here we say new WebSocket, and now we are using the built-in WebSocket class in JavaScript. And now we say, or we give the address of our WebSocket. So in my case, it's localhost port 7000/WS. And now what we want to do is we want to return new promise, because we will basically check on this WS in class instance if it already has the so-called ready state equal to 1, because when it has the ready state equal to 1, it means that it has connected. So what we'll do is we'll return a promise. The promise takes a callback that takes a resolve function. And here what we'll do is we'll create a timer. We'll say const timer, and we'll set this timer to set interval. And set interval just allows us to execute an action every time, and the time we can specify. Right, and once again, it takes a callback, so it takes a function that it will execute each time period that we specify. And what we want to do here is we want to check if ws.readyState is strictly equal to 1. And if it is, we want to clear this not clear immediate, but we want to clear the interval. So we'll say clear timer, and we'll resolve our promise. So we'll resolve and we'll return the WS. So what happens by us passing the WS to the resolve function, the WS will be automatically returned if we await this promise. So here, the WS we pass in here, basically the new WebSocket here, will become this WS that we have here. Okay, that's fantastic. What we need to still add is the time period. Let's say just 10 milliseconds, so we'll check very often. And that's it for the connection to our WebSocket. Okay, now we have only connected, so let's currently try to add some actions to it. For example, we already have the WS here, so we can use it. Let's say ws.send, and then say json.stringify. And now here, let's say message and say test message. Let's just now see if this all works. We now need to go to our HTML file. We have to add this little script part, script that will have a source of script.js, and then we'll just add the type and then module. Okay, this is it. Let's now save it. I will restart our application once again. Okay, it should be running, so I should be able to refresh it on the right-hand side, and then we will be able to check for the results. So basically what we are currently expecting is that we will connect to a WebSocket server, and we will send from the front end to the backend this test message, and our backend will currently console.log this message. So let's just quickly do one more thing. Let's run our app.js. So we also have to start our backend. Okay, so our backend should now be started. So let's once again refresh this, and we can see that it was successfully sent. So what we managed to do, right? And here in this terminal, I have the app.js running, so the backend of our WebSockets. So what we managed to do is we managed to send a message from our front end to our backend. And that's all fun and nice, but we are also able to do that with HTTP. So with standard REST API, right? So for example, when we went back and we created the to-do app, this was basically working exactly the same thing. And in the server, it's also working the exact same thing. So what we can now do is we can specify here, after we log this message to the console, we can also say that now we want to send this message to our client here. So what do we do in such a case is we say, when we receive a message, let's say ws.send, and here once again, json.stringify, and let's say that we take the, once again, we create a message key, and here let's message, and here let's take the message that we have received. Let's take the message out of it. I think the key was also named message, and let's perhaps add to it So let's say plus response. Right, so we'll say test message response as a response. So let's maybe put it into a new line so that we can see it better. Okay, that's good. So now what we will do, what our backend will do, it will, when it receives a message, it will log this to the console, and then it will answer to our front-end application. Okay, let's now, what we need to do is we need to now add a logic on our front-end application so that it can also act when it receives a message. And the way we do it is super simple. Underneath here, we just say vs.onMessage. So it's super simple, but slightly different. And then vs.onMessage will be equal to a function that will take a basically a message as a string, so a message string. And this function, what it will do is it will just console.log this message, but it will console.log the message that we still need to parse. So we also could just log the message as a string, but in order to use it afterwards, we should parse it. Okay, let's save this. And now our app is running, our server is running. So when I refresh this, we should see a message that will appear here, so on our backend. So now we see the message, that's good, it appeared. And now if I go to inspect, and then to console, we have an error that there was an unexpected token in JSON at position 1. And this is because I forgot here that we need to say JSON.parse message string.data. This is why I said it's slightly different but similar. Okay, so I save it now here and I refresh it right here. And what we can see now is that here in the console we have test message response. So basically what happened is our application, so our client-side application, has sent a request or a message to our WebSocket server. And this logic that we have in the app.js file, on the one hand side, it has logged this message to our console, but also it has sent the message back to the client as a response. And this is for now maybe looking like a standard request response model, but you will see shortly that what we are also able to do, we are able to store the connection to a client, and we will store that in a variable, and then we will use it even if we don't receive a message to respond or to send a message to the client that is still connected. But this is all to come in the next episode. So in this episode, we have taken care of the theoretical background, what a WebSocket is. We have taken a look at what we will be building, and we also started with our setup. So we have the basic server working. We are able to send messages from one client to the server and from the server to the client. So I would like to thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episodes where we will develop this application furthermore. Thank you.